G'day and welcome to All About Branding. I'm your host, as always, Frank here. I am live streaming here on YouTube and on Instagram Live. Welcome if you're here watching this live. It's me, your host, Frank, and I have been away doing this now for, I think it's over a month now. I think it's like 6 weeks of a break, and for good reason. We moved house. We moved further west of where we were in the Blue Mountains to a little town called Lithgow. There's not that much here. It's an old mining town, and it's where my wife actually grew up, and her family are still here as well. So part of the reason why we moved back. But we're all settled in. We're unpacked. We're here. I moved my office into a bigger space. It's double the size, which is fantastic. And I don't know about the background that I've got here, if that's going to stay, or I'll throw up the green screen and have a snazzy shot of the desk because it looks primo. But here we are, making content again and back into the All About Branding series of content that talks about branding of all things. It is called All About Branding for a reason. So if you're listening on the podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're here on Instagram Live, welcome, as I said, and let's dive into this fortnight's topic as we start the process again of getting back on schedule, is differentiation or distinctiveness as a brand. And the aptly named, article and guide that I've made, which is quite lengthy. It's about a 20-minute read. Good luck to you. But it goes quite in depth in how I see the difference between the two, or how you distinguish the two, is that I think we can ditch the need to be a differentiated brand. Why I say this, I'll get into, but I think instead we can try to be a distinctive brand, which is far more achievable. And I want to give you an example of the two mixed in with a bit of brand loyalty in there. So when I go to the supermarket of a week, do the grocery shop, it's on a nice, neat little list that we do in an Excel spreadsheet because we're so damn organized. And in that shop, I need to find for myself, for my lunch each week, a specific type of salad dressing. Sounds very innocuous. Now, this particular salad dressing is one that I used to buy a different brand, but now only one brand exists, and the one that I used to buy no longer exists. It doesn't make that type of dressing anymore, much to my dismay. So I did have two options. Now I have one. The other one doesn't exist. Now, for me, if there was two options there, I would have picked the original one because the packaging, to be honest, was far prettier, and it's a more recognizable brand that I'd been using and exposed to for many years since I was a kid. But those fuckers, they stopped making their version, and now I'm only left with the one with some pretty average looking packaging. That's okay. Now, it's a first world problem, I understand that, but if both existed, as I said, I would prefer the other one, and I'd still continue to buy that one. But here's the kicker. If it wasn't available, I would still go back to the other one. I'm not loyal enough. There's no brand loyalty for me to want to pick or not pick the alternative. So to me, they're not exactly differentiated. One is distinct, one is not. I guess the differentiated product would be a totally different salad dressing. And again, I would be happy to go and buy that if I had to. If there was no other options, I would just throw my hands up in the air, obviously, and go, ugh. But I'd still go out and buy a different type of dressing entirely because I can't deal with a bland salad. I need some flavor. So the first concept in there is differentiation. The salad dressing has no equal in offering or availability to satiate my need. So at the moment, I only have one option and I need it. You need a gimme, gimme, gimme. The second thing that's going on here in this situation is distinctiveness. When there's another brand offering that there's the same type of dressing that I used to have, and I'd pick the one that I chose based on its distinctiveness because I recognize it, I'll grab it, I've used it before, all those things. And the third part of it, as I mentioned, is brand loyalty or lack thereof. I'm still willing to pick up an alternative option begrudgingly if it's available because I need some flavor on my leafy greens. So brand loyalty aside, because that's a whole other kettle of fish, I want to focus this on differentiation and distinctiveness, especially why we don't necessarily need to be focusing and feeling the pressure of needing to be so different that you may as well have been from Jupiter or made your product on Jupiter, or it comes from there. Having worked with small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses in many different industries for the past few years, many business owners think they are or want to be unbelievably different, and they think they are from their competition. Unfortunately, but it's not exactly unfortunate, but they're not. And that's okay. And this is why I want to pose something for you to consider that might challenge your concept of thinking of needing to be different to succeed and to stand out, is that you think that you might need to be different to succeed. I say only schmonly. You don't need to be the only ones doing what you do to succeed. And instead, focusing on being distinctive is far more appropriate approach for the effort that we want to put in to developing and growing your brand. Because it's going to help you achieve brand success, and it has the potential to help you grow more than if you are hell-bent on trying to maintain being different, just to say that you are the only ones that do this. And again, I say only schmonly. So it's something that's not going to stay like that forever. It's really going to be hard to maintain that differentiated presence in a market. And I think distinctiveness is a much more achievable way of going about it. So before I kick in further here, let's define how I see at least what a distinctive brand is and what a differentiated brand is. So a distinctive brand to me is one that distinguishes itself in the market amongst the competition for greater identification and recall by utilizing a brand identity and distinctive brand assets. A distinctive brand asset could be a logo, colors, packaging, signage, stationery, all these things that we engage with and see or hear from a brand to identify it over others. So an example of this would be Coke, Pepsi, and RC Cola. You might have heard of all three. I'm sure you've heard of the first two at least, but all offer a cola drink, not a Coca-Cola drink. They all offer a cola drink beverage. They taste the same. That's fairly debatable. They basically taste slightly different to one another, but it can be indistinguishable to most people because you see the Pepsi challenge and everything, and no one really knows which one's which when you're blindfolded. But if Pepsi Max is the desired brand, like it is for my father-in-law, but it's not available, Coke Zero or even another type of Coca-Cola or even RC Cola, if that was the thing there, would most likely suffice as a substitute for him, and most likely for me as well, and maybe for you. You let me know if that's your kind of thing, or if you're a die-hard loyalist to only having that or going without if not. If you basically the reasons here that we identify and pick one another is not, I guess, for the taste of it or that loyalty, brand loyalty. A lot of the time we say we're so loyal to some brands, but in the moment, if we just need a Coke, we just need that cola flavor in our lives to go with a whiskey or something, if you want to water it down, you'll go with what's available. But there's another side to it with identifying which one's which is the color, the logo, the story, the tone of voice, the customer service, the packaging, and even that brand name that offers that distinctive difference so you know which one's which when they're pretty similar. There's a very similar example here in Australia. There's two really big department stores. One's called Myer, one's called David Jones. They're really not that distinct. You can walk into one and walk out wondering which one you're actually in. They look so similar inside that there's nothing distinctive to set them apart, especially when they offer the exact same kind of products inside, from clothing to homewares to bedding, whatever. So the pros of having a distinctive brand is that you can stand out in a crowded market or have a similar competitive offering and even set apart multiple offerings of your own. So if you had multiple different products like Coca-Cola does, they have Coke Zero, they have normal Coke, they have Diet Coke, you can distinctively tell your consumers apart from what different offerings you have. Pretty straightforward, I hope. The cons of it, though, on the other side, is that it can be harder to have less opportunity. It can be harder or have less opportunity to be the go-to choice as a market leader in an already established market. So if you come along and you want to be the market leader, you're going to have to really work hard to get in the minds and capture that attention of your consumers. It takes time, it takes money, it takes effort to get there. And if there are big leaders in a market of the likes of Amazon, it's going to be really hard to be known and discovered and bought from your consumers. It's not to say it's impossible though. The other con to it is that consumers are happy to pick an alternative if you are not available, compared to a differentiated brand where it's a completely different from anything else available. They either have to go with you or go without. Now, a competitor can also use similar distinctive assets or price you completely out of the market. That's the other con that goes into being a distinctive brand. The bigger fish always wins in some respects. Now, a differentiated brand has no equal competition based on one or more of the following things: the offering, the location, the availability, and meeting a specific need or want, which most likely defines a new category for the most part, or defines a new trend or consumer need, kind of like the iPhone coming out of nowhere with a touchscreen. No one knew that they needed a touchscreen with internet and emails and all the different things that came with it. Debatably, it could even come down to the size of the business. So anything from an Amazon all the way down to a mum and pop shop selling different kinds of homewares and electronics and things like that. So examples here of a differentiated brand is Dollar Shave Club. So it was a subscription-based razor offering that broke the category and buyer behavior where competitors only sold in retailers, at supermarkets or in specialty shaving shops. It wasn't a thing to buy them online and have it in a subscription model where you would get a new razor every week continuously until your subscription was cancelled. Another example here is the only car mechanic for 300 miles. They're your only option when your car breaks down in that location and it being available. It's truly differentiated in its market situation, but it's also not unique, because if you picked up that car mechanic and plonked it in a town with 5 others, it's not differentiated again. So the pros to being differentiated is you can be the only option and the go-to choice as a result. But the cons of it are that you typically don't last as competitors come along, and what are you left with? And the other part to it is that you may be too much of a niche offering to then grow. And I'll get into some of these points in a bit here. But the midpoint here is that you can be bought out, which could be a pro and it could be a con, depending on which way you look at it. So if you get the attention of a bigger fish, or someone comes along and wants to invest and then they buy you out, depends on whether you see that as a good thing or a bad thing. Otherwise, they could do a Facebook and just come and eat you and copy you if you don't want to sell. That's the other scrupulous kind of way of going about it. But the most simple way that I could separate the two is that differentiation is not being an orange when the rest are green apples. So you might think that that's differentiating, but at the end of the day, they're both still fruit. If you're a broccoli, on the other hand, and the rest are apples, then you're differentiated even though you're using the same distinctive asset, which is the color in that respect, both green. But the difference is here, one is a vegetable and the rest are fruit. And that's the that's the differentiated difference. So it might not be the perfect analogy. You can argue with me on that one. But I'm sure you could poke holes through it. And analogies aside, let's kick on here, because I need to ask you these initial kind of questions here to make you think about this kind of idea of whether or not you need to be differentiated. And ask yourself this: why do you need to be different to be successful? Personally, for me, my answer is no to this question, because it's especially true that you can say that success is subjective. And I mentioned before in my example above, for distinctiveness, of Coca-Cola and Pepsi are both cola drinks represented distinctively, but not essentially differentiated, not meaningfully differentiated for most consumers. They coexist and they compete for connection with their consumers. Both are successful market leaders, with Coca-Cola being the more dominant of the two, arguably, but for market share they are. And that's down to the reach of their marketing and their budget and the result of that success. So think to yourself again, why do you need to be different to be successful when you can coexist with other competitors in the market? And for most industries, you're going to have a competitor or multiple competitors. So the second question to you is, do you need to offer things that are vastly or entirely different where no alternative can be compared or chosen? Is that what your market's looking for? Do you have some grand idea that it just is an absolute game changer or not? Or do you need to be identified as such by a consumer where you're the only considered brand? So my answer to the first part of the question, do we need to offer things that are vastly or entirely different where no alternative can be compared or chosen? My answer to that question is no. Unless geographically you're the only one, then sure. You can be the only coffee shop in town. Great. It's very rare though. But my answer to the second question, do we need to be identified as such by consumers where we are the only considered brand? Absolutely. We want to be the go-to brand in someone's mind, and you don't need to be distinctively different. You don't need to be different completely for a consumer to think of you as the go-to choice. When you think of a tissue box and needing a tissue, which brand do you think of? The first one that will come to mind is Kleenex, because I can't remember any other brand apart from Aldi's no-name brand with tissues. Same with fast food. The first one that comes to mind is McDonald's. I know there's KFC. I know there's Hungry Jack's or Burger King. But the first one that always comes to mind is McDonald's, because to me, it's the biggest. They've done that purposefully because they appear in every town, every city in the world that I go to, there's a McDonald's there. It's saturation. And it's distinctive that I can recognize it from a million miles away. So it's a tricky one to consider, not just because it was in two parts, but because I think that most of us are told in business that we need to be the only choice our consumers think of when it comes to what it is we offer, regardless if there is minimal competition. And this is correct to an extent, but I don't think it is, I don't believe it being the only choice of our consumers. Sorry, let me start that again. It's correct to an extent, but I don't believe being the only choice our consumers think of is mutually exclusive to being inherently or meaningfully or perceptually different as a brand. I'll leave you with that to ponder on. You can read this back on the blog as well. But where distinctiveness can play out in the market is it happens in a few ways. Being a distinctive brand, I think, is an approach where branding can play out in a few ways of being distinctive to first capture the attention and that first moment of connection that you have where someone sees you for the first time, hears about you for the first time, out of context. So not at a shop or anything like that, in something like a ad or a social media post, a word of mouth opportunity, something like that, where they first distinctly see you or hear you or are told about you. The next distinctive way things play out if you're a distinctive brand is that you stand out over the competition when the consumer has a need, even if the consumer knows about the brand or not, or they know, at least know where to likely find the offering. So let's say you need to go buy a car, you go to the dealership alley, and there's two dealerships next to each other on that road. You know, that's the difference where you go, okay, I'm looking for that one. That's the one that stands out for me if I have no idea about the brands. Or if I do, I know I want a Holden rather than a Ford, and I will go to the Holden dealership because I can distinctly remember what that color looked like. The red and the lion and the logo, great, or the style of car itself. The other option is two options on the shelf, you know, in next to each other on the supermarket shelf. You go into the salad dressings. As I mentioned before, there's a butt ton of them. You might go in there and go, okay, I'm going to pick the one that just stands out to me on the shelf. I just need a kind of salad dressing that is mayonnaise. That's the one for me. Or the price is the distinctive part for me in terms of a choice. Marketing is doing its job. Another way distinctive brands play out in the real world is that it's distinct to spot the brand when searching for it in context. So if it's a Google search ad, you can identify the name. A name is a brand asset, distinctive brand asset. Or a social media search, you're trying to find G'day Frank. My face pops up with the pink. Or at a shopping mall, you're trying to find a certain shop in a crowded market of all different fashion brands. you find the one you're looking for based on the logo and the name and maybe a distinctive color. Or in a shopping aisle or on the shelf, all those things. You know what you're looking for, you're trying to find it in context. And the last one is to be distinct, to see or find it again, intentionally or unintentionally, in a new location. So let's say if I went to Paris and I was not even looking for McDonald's, but I just was looking for something quick and easy. I see the McDonald's logo. I know that's McDonald's. It's a different color. Rather than red and yellow, they use yellow and green. But I know it's them. Excuse me. Now, there's this concept of being the loudest in the room that I have always thought to myself that the person with the loudest voice in the room is the one that's more likely to be heard, seen, and remembered. Whether or not what they say is game-changing or total crap is irrelevant, as it's comparable to how you stand out as a brand in this context. So the best example of this is the annoying jingle that an Australian supermarket here called Coles used in a long-running advertising campaign with the slogan "Down, down, prices are down," to the tune of this English rock band's called Status Quo and their song "Down, Down," which they used reworking of the lyrics and they actually played the song themselves, but it was goddamn annoying when it played every single ad break because it was just saturated every ad break across all the different TV networks here in Australia. But as a result of it, boy, did you remember it and associate it with Coles, the supermarket, without even hearing or seeing the brand name in the logo. That's that distinctive asset. It can be sound as well. But the way I see this playing out is that if you show up with the most loudest voice that reaches the most people and that look is identifiable enough to stand out from others, even if they're saying or offering the exact same things, then you're more likely to be recognized, to be identified, to capture someone's attention and be remembered for it, as in turn that can drive your business if all things are positive, or if all roads are leading to positive. If it's a really negative experience, it's debatable whether or not it works for you or not. The jingle that I mentioned with Coles, I guess it works because longevity, it was annoying at the start, but you still kind of think of that. So if you hear that song, you think of Coles now. It's a weird association. And it's why marketing and advertising and media exist, to reward those with the loudest, most prolific voices and those who are willing to pay for it with time, with energy, and not just money. Additionally, the consumer may not need what you now are shoving in front of their face and being exposed to your brand, but it can work towards being the first thought of brand when it comes time to need what you have to offer. So there's that, I don't know if it's a quote or a statistic. I think it's a statistic where you need 7 brand impressions to then for a consumer to make a sale, want to make a purchase. So if you show up 7 times in their psyche, it might be totally subconscious. They might not even remember it in the time, but there's something that's just getting embedded in their mind, if it's just the color or the logo or someone's face, something they said, some kind of music they hear, that association can be kept up and whooshka. I don't know if I've ever said whooshka in a podcast before or a live stream. So regardless of whether or not you need to be different, realistically, I truly believe that all brands should be practicing distinctiveness in their brand. It's why I exist as a brand identity designer, both in your brand assets and the identity that you create. So logo, colors, packaging, tone of voice, signage, packaging. I already said packaging. What else could be? Stationery. There's another one for you. But even the brand name itself, there's a distinctive asset there. Whereas differentiation is like writing 100% unique song, like Ed Sheeran's found out that it's hard to do, or the people that tried to sue him found it's hard to do, or a genre of music when there are only 12 notes to work with. You know, it's not impossible, but it's tough. And in such a crowded and ever-growing global market, it's getting smaller and smaller as we get more global with the internet and everything else, it's going to be less realistic to think that we have a unique idea that's going to be game-changing. It's not to say it can't happen, but to have a unique offering and for it to be successful is quite rare now. And it doesn't need to be that distinctively different to be successful. You can come along with a marginally different, but still comparable service or product or brand, personal brand, and still be successful. Now, the interesting quote that I found in this book, I'm going to show it here on screen if you're watching on YouTube or Instagram Live. This book here by this guy, Byron Sharp, it's called How Brands Grow. This quote, branding lasts, differentiation doesn't, is from his book. You can have a read. There's a whole chapter on differentiation. I'm not going to go into the book and, rehash his findings like a reciting parrot. But this quote plays out in a few examples, and I can quickly recall a few brands that we'd likely know where this plays true. So both Uber and Airbnb were category breakers by offering a proper differentiated blue ocean service and brand experience to go with it, to connect with, meaning nothing else was on the market quite like it. Sure, there were taxis and boutique bed and breakfasts and even arguably hotels, but they weren't meeting that need or that scale of what the services were offering. But both now have competition. And it didn't take long. As with anything that kicks off and becomes successful, it becomes a gold rush. However, both brands still exist, though there are other options on the market. But what makes their brands last? Branding and marketing. Their consumers connect with them because they continually offer captivating moments to continually connect with their existing customers and attract new customers with the same efforts. But on the murky flip side, being different isn't without its perils. And I kind of mentioned this in the cons before of being differentiated. Now, this is when big brands lurk. I should have like a sound pad on that for my broadcaster. Anyway, Amazon is known to kill off its own sellers on its marketplace by undercutting their prices and offering its own version of a product it sees third-party sellers generating successful sales on that platform. I've heard about it with toilet paper and other little small kind of things. Nothing big and major brands or anything like that sell on Amazon. But those mum and pops that probably drop ship or something on Amazon just get blown out of the water when Amazon sees sales go through the roof. Same goes with Instagram /Facebook /Meta, effectively burying Snapchat when it released Instagram stories. Effectively remaking the same base features Snapchat had seen great success from and based its whole experience and brand on, in that short form, limited time, published video content features that no other social platform was doing at the time, blew them out of the water. I don't know anyone that uses Snapchat anymore personally. Maybe some younger kids do, I don't know. But in both cases, the brand people use most, see most, hear most, and connect with most wins. Which has nothing to do with the size of the brand, but it's more likely to be the bigger brand that wins due to having more market opportunities to connect with consumers at greater scale based on budget spending, reach, and time in the market. Now, there's another aspect here, which is niching. And I said it was a con that you might be too niche just for the sake of being different. In a time where the market is perpetually growing, I talk about the market a lot, the market. This is all part of it. Perpetually growing in a global manner, if the brand is agreeably different, let's say it is, these days it's likely to serve a specific niche or a particular consumer. This might mean that it doesn't appeal to the broader market need. It might never be. But why is this a negative? Well, firstly, it's not to say that you can't have such a niche offering and it be a positive, because of course it can be successful. A higher price can command a greater reputation in many instances and can precede the offering of what the brand is. I see this a lot in B2B or service-based brands. Just like my fellow branding, marketing, creative people, you can niche. It's not to say you can't. But on the other hand, having a different but niche brand has lesser chance of becoming a wider market need, which equates to lesser potential growth. So especially if you're a B2C, so a business to consumer, a consumer brand, and the unit price of the offering is relatively low in its respective category. So this is anything from $1, for a bottle of water to maybe a $30,000 car, which is something that I kind of drive, a Subaru Forester. It's about $30,000. If it's a luxury brand, it's likely to target a smaller market of wealthy consumers and requires a higher unit price to balance out profitable revenue. But if you have a small intended market and a low price offering, it becomes harder to grow as a result, especially if there are low repeat business opportunities. So people don't come back and buy another Louis Vuitton handbag every week as they would a grocery store where you need to buy apples every week, or milk, probably milk. But I always think about this in the context of my own business, especially when I'm trying to niche down. And I had this experience of trying to niche to help podcasters. If my brand was to offer and meet only the need of a small amount of people based on their needs, their budget, or their geographic location, in addition to me being only me, my time is limited and I can only do so much. How do I grow as a brand based on all those factors? Or even for my wife, who runs her own jewelry brand, making handmade earrings, where the price of a pair that she makes is roughly $30 on average, and it's significantly lower in its cost compared to my average 10 grand branding services. Her earrings are catered to a specific market who appreciate and wear custom handmade jewelry, and she's a team of one. So it's hard to grow your brand if we're doing what Byron Sharp is wanting you to do to grow your brand. It's hard to grow based on that offering alone. It's not to say that we're necessarily differentiating ourselves. I'm not saying that, because there is a multitude of competitors out there, and we know that because we need to stand out distinctively with the loudest voice possible to become known for what it is that we do and attract, our best shot of success. So for me, niching down to be the go-to choice is totally different from the rest. From the rest, is a lesser viable decision for someone like myself and possibly for you. But on the other hand, if being a distinctive brand can be that, it can be a viable decision for me to just stand out in the crowd, show up as much as I can, be distinctive with the pink color like it's going out of fashion, have an interesting personality that can connect with you, all these things. It's not tooting my own horn, it's just being pragmatic and knowing that I don't need to be different. I just need to be distinct because it's most achievable for me to grow in the way that I can most viably. Now, when you're in dire need of hydration, which I am actually, just going to take a little sip there. Do you care which brand you buy? This is the thing that kind of blows differentiation out of the water. If you look at any highly competitive category where multiple brands thrive, as I mentioned earlier in this, with an ever-increasing market of competitors just, popping up every day, be it cars, be it clothing, cosmetics, books, beer, or one of my favorite examples, which I'd love to develop a brand of this product that makes differentiation non-existent and market as absolute grave robbers, is bottled water. A tall cylindrical bottle that's made of glass, like Voss water, is not differentiating itself from Fiji water with its rectangle plastic bottle, or even pump water, if you've ever seen that, with its plastic bottle and it has like the pop top kind of cap. Those are packaging features, while different to each other, arguably, are not differentiating. Why? What distinguishes each brand is the distinctive assets that help me, maybe you, identify and make a decision based on their bottle, in addition to the price, the placement, maybe the promotion that's going with it, 2 for 1, and my wife needs one as well, rather than where the product itself is from, in terms of where the water is sourced. I wonder if you agree with that. A distinctive asset can be the shape of the bottle, the logo, the color, the graphics, and even the copy written on the bottle. Is most likely written in the voice of each brand's identity. And why I don't believe this is differentiation is that there is less likely to be a meaningful difference to the consumer, me, you, with each brand offering when the desired option is not available. For me, Fiji water is sourced from Fiji, yes, but does it make the water nicer if it's sourced from Australia? And how would you know without trying it? Probably because you're being told about it and you're being told which one's better, right? In the copy on the bottle, or it's sourced from the glacier of Iceland and it's just so, you've never had a water experience like this. Welcome to marketing and consumer bias. It's not differentiating, it's distinctive. It's marketing telling you one's better than the other. But let me pose this scenario too. If Voss water is either the only brand you know of the 3 brands, or if it's the preferred brand at least that you want and it wasn't available and you're dying of thirst, do you then not buy the pump or the Fiji water if both are on the shelf as an alternative to Voss water? Meaning, are pump and Fiji water different enough for you not to want to buy a similar alternative, or even something similar like a carbonated water, like a bubbly water? No flavor, just carbonated, it has bubbles, the soda water, mineral water. That's another question there for you to ask yourself and notice in your consumer buying habits. Are you willing to go either without or choose a similar product as an alternative? For me, in this water example, it still comes back to the packaging being distinctive and being an asset used to identify the brand rather than to differentiate it. Whereas branding is to identify and create a captivating moment, as I call it, with the consumer, rather than your brand saying, ooh, 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 I'm different. There's no one like me, and you have to choose me as I'm the only one here available to you. That in itself doesn't make me want to buy. It's just that I have no other option, and I most likely have to choose that brand or go without and die of dehydration. That's very dire. This is where consumer perception and perceived differentiation comes in. Thinking that they're different just because they look different, or that I'm told they're different by the brand itself, or maybe even somebody else that's bought it and said, this is what I think of it. The best example, though, is being indirectly told that they're different just by the price, for instance. It's making me think that one is better than the other and must be different. If one's more expensive, it must be better. You've got to love marketing. That said, if there are a plethora of alternatives where I have the option of a comparable and available offering, brand presence or loyalty may as well be non-existent when I'm dying of thirst. I just need the friggin' water because I'm dehydrated. In most scenarios, I'm not going to go to the next shop because the first shop didn't have the brand of water I typically buy. I'll buy the first thing that looks like water. And that's a very specific example, I granted, but it's something to identify in your buying habits, or even your consumers' buying habits, whether or not they're willing to try something else that's like you, or you are the go-to choice. If you're available in that location, if you have the right price, all these kind of things that makes you stand out and make you want to be the choice for them. Now, I don't want to poo-poo differentiation here in terms of making an impact on buying decisions. That makes for shitty water, pun intended, if I'm not going to acknowledge this, especially in this water context, to show that there can be meaningful differences to a consumer. For instance, take that Voss bottle again. It's made of glass, and it may be the only choice a consumer wants to make because that consumer consciously avoids buying plastic packaging in its products that the consumer buys. And Voss water, in most cases, I think this is probably the only one that I've ever seen, is the only glass bottle as a consumer product that you can buy for packaged water. Or maybe the product is made in Australia and the consumer only buys Australian owned and made products, very loyal to their country, very patriotic, but wants that quality, that known quality that Australian products tend to have. That can be a deciding factor. That can be for a consumer a meaningful difference. Or even the store that the water is sold at, if it was a BP service station, the negative impact that BP has had on the environment can be a negatively differentiating reason that sets BP apart due to their faults and makes a consumer not want to shop there. Obviously, that wasn't an intentional step for BP to do as a brand, but if you were to define differentiation of a brand based on consumers' perception of difference, then there is this side to it. And I don't want to go without mentioning that. But interestingly, to get out of that literal mess from oil spills in 2006 and 2010, BP turned to their branding and renewal of their brand promises to help navigate their way out, kind of slither their way out into renewables and all the more positive impacts they can make on the environment, and get out of that negative customer perception to get back to where they were and had built up decades of strong consumer connection. They've turned to branding. They've turned to their distinctive assets to pull them out. Now, there's one part to this which I've banged on about before in the brand strategy guide that I did. You can check that out on my website or on Medium or on the previous podcast episode or YouTube live stream, is positioning. Excuse me. Positioning is key when it comes to branding and brand growth, granted, and even marketing. It's a big part of brand strategy, and it's a big part of a marketing plan. However, it doesn't require you to be different for the sake of being positioned in the mind of your consumer. Positioning is not as much about being different as it is placing you in the mind of a consumer so that you're thought of first. Positioning is positioning your brand in relation to your competitors is to identify the need and make a decision based on where you can slot into the spot of the most viable target market need and be, that first third of brand. It might influence the offering you deliver. So you tailor your offering to fit the viable market. So your product or service changes slightly to meet that need. But it most likely influences the distinctive assets and marketing strategy that you then deploy. What color do you use? If one competitor is using red, you should use yellow or blue or something that's going to stand out distinctively. Or in your marketing strategy of how you're going to put some ads out in front of people, are your users using Instagram mainly? You market there. If your competitors are highly saturated on YouTube, do you go down the YouTube route and try and compete there, or pay less and maybe do it on LinkedIn? There's some examples. But if one, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like talking to myself in my own head. If one consumer is blue, the other is pink, pick a different color. It's as simple as that. If none are open late that you have in terms of a store, maybe you're a pharmacy and your consumers need an option that's open later than what they typically are, and the closing time is like 6 p.m. and someone needs a pharmacy open till 9 p.m. Be there for them if you can. It's not to say you have to though. However, I'd like to treat positioning of a brand as being, as I said before, thought of first when your offer is needed. Because I don't believe your consumers are thinking about the differences any more than they are thinking about what stands out to them to meet their needs at the time. Because I don't know about you, but I don't compare the new iPhone and a Google Pixel phone and think one is not a phone and one is. They are both capable of doing very similar things, arguably the same things, for day-to-day use. But one fits into the ecosystem that Apple has made notoriously hard to get away from when it meets my needs and has built a brand in my mind that I turn to first. So the easy solution, if you take the distinctive brand approach, is to give consumers 1 to 3 things to remember you for that will make them think of you more than the competitors when they need what you have to offer. It could be the color, it could be the shape or style of your packaging, the customer service even that they experience, the results that they actually achieve once they are received. Maybe you offer a course and you change the game in their lives of what their business is or what their life experience is, whatever it is, or even the brand name. As 72% of B2C consumers make purchases based on the brand name alone. That's crazy. So it might be just a recognizable name, or it might be just a name that gets your attention in a new category that they're unfamiliar with, and they go with one that they can trust or that they can pronounce easily rather than one that they can't pronounce, whatever it is. For more on positioning there, please do look at that previous guide that I've made about brand strategy. It's in there. There's a little section on positioning. But what does this mean in totality for small to medium businesses? Chances are, if you're reading the guide, you're watching this live stream, or you're listening to this podcast, you're either a small to medium business or you work with small to medium businesses and you want to help grow your brand or their brand that you are part of. Most marketing books and people out there that talk about marketing that I see say you got to be different to succeed. That was something that was kind of ingrained in me in understanding what branding and marketing could do. But between the 1960s and 1980s, my wife's grandfather was a dentist in the rural town that they lived in, which is actually the town that my wife and I have actually just moved to. And her grandfather, Jack Mitchell, he was an Order of Australia medalist, so Jack Mitchell, OAM, was the go-to dentist because he was the only dentist in town. He was instantly differentiated due to his geographic location, which met the needs of the whole town. Everyone needs their teeth fixed, even though some of us don't go more often than we should. It's a rarity for a business to have this geographic advantage of being the only one, especially if you're in a metropolitan area, whereas we're more of a regional area. So the chances of you having that opportunity is less likely, but it means you can rely on your brand to position it as distinct as an offering for your consumers for them to turn to. And if a brand fails to develop or maintain differentiation, consumers have no basis for choosing it over others. The product price will then have the determining factor in a decision to purchase. This quote is by a marketing author. His name is David Acker. I've referenced him in some other stuff. Some of his stuff is good. And it's 20 years old, but he might have changed his tune here since. But either way, that kind of statement, I think, is something that we've all been attuned to, practicing branding in such a light. If a brand fails to develop and maintain differentiation, consumers have no basis for choosing it over others. Ah, bullshit. Really? There is many reasons for being distinctive that make me choose one over the other. I'm crazy about branding for that myself, and maybe you are too. Maybe your consumers are too. You don't need to be vastly different. That you may as well be from ours. Additionally, when I hear marketing and branding people say things like, you shouldn't use words like integrity and innovation or professionalism as your brand values, or include those words in your brand purpose, they should be a given. Come on. Sure, they're cliche, yes, but if it's such a blanket statement like that, it lacks nuance in being distinctive or hell, even being different. Because if all your competitors, let's say, and all your consumers say this about your competitors, that they lack integrity and they're all salesy scumbags, own integrity as the cornerstone of your brand and make it that foundation you wish to build your brand on, and make that a distinct part of your message and your identity for consumers to connect with. You're not being different because they could have easily said, your competitors, they could have easily said that they have integrity, but the proof will be in the pudding of what you offer, and your customers will remember you for that. If you say you have that integrity, or if that's the cornerstone of your brand, or your employees, your team embodies that and it plays out, you are going to have consumers say that when they write your testimonial, they write your review. Own those things that are cliche and make them distinct and ownable for you. Because if it sounds cliche, that's fine. Someone else can say that, but it's distinct to your brand. So what's important in the example of defining your values or purpose is to align them with how you and your team operate and how it's going to be useful day to day, rather than coming up with something entirely different and flashy and unique just to sound different when it's entirely useless, when someone doesn't even know what the word means, but it sounds amazing. Because what changed for me was that if you want to be different, you got to look, you got to sound, you got to be personally driven, different, and have an offering that is so different that there is nothing like it, or has never been anything like it that comes close or comparable. It's really unachievable. It's not to say it's impossible, but it's really unachievable. Otherwise, just like my wife's grandfather, Jack, if you're the only one geographically available, then you've got that going for you, and you may as well go with it, and you don't really have to worry about being distinctive. It will help though, and people will appreciate if you look professional and give them some trust, and you could raise your rates as a result of that. All those kind of things come with that. But for most of us, excuse me, only achieving what we look or sound like is easy for small to medium businesses to roll with. It is distinctive assets rather than differentiating qualities that are going to set you apart. By being identifiable, by being attractive, engaging, memorable, right out of the gate. And this is why I don't understand businesses that avoid engaging in branding businesses to have something, or branding their business, or helping others brand their business in order to start and capture the attention of their first consumers. I don't understand why businesses don't want to engage in branding in some light to make that first impression count and not see that as valuable to their business, to their consumers, and their continued success to get that thing off the ground. Sure, you're not going to have enough budget to throw thousands and thousands of dollars at it. I appreciate that, but not taking that seriously, I don't quite appreciate. Even if all your competitors offer and say the same things, same kinds of things that you would to attract a consumer, you can say it louder, more often, in the right places, with conviction, while saying it in a tone of voice that is authentic to you and that's how I approach it. I want to create captivating moments of connection with my consumers, be it clients, be it fellow branding people here that might learn a thing or two about how I approach it differently. You can be reasonably attractive to connect with people just from looks and sound alone. You can captivate someone's attention to come and learn a bit more about what it is you do. It might be slightly different to the next person. That might be worthwhile to somebody. Those little things that make that difference. But if you do that, you're going to be good. You'll be off to a good start, especially if you're going to show up time and time and time and time and time again, as many times as I see my kids watching Bluey on TV, if you can. Because a consistent brand presentation across all your platforms, all your touch points, has been found to increase revenue by up to 23%. Do you want that now or do you want that later? I'll leave that up to you. So in essence here, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Most importantly, however, this need to reinvent the wheel for the sake of being different is a massive distraction, I believe, at least, when more than one brand that offers the same thing can still see shared success. You see it play out everywhere. The perfect example of this, and I'm sure you've seen a scenario of this too, when I see things like coffee shops. In the suburb I used to live in, Sydney, they had a strip of different shops, but there were 5 coffee shops in the space of 100 meters of one another on that same street. It's the same thing I actually see in the town that we've just moved to. There are 5 coffee shops in the space of maybe 200 meters, all of whom have a fair share of customers day in and day out. I guess success is subjective there, but I see people in there every day in, day out, and their businesses are running. They're operating. There's 5 of them. I don't even drink coffee, so I don't really see the appeal, but for food and all the rest of it, I get it. And this makes me think of, that putting that pressure of needing to be the only one doing as you do is more likely to detract from more meaningful, important things that can be done to make an impact on your business and your consumers. Like meeting the needs of your consumers and what they have day to day, and becoming a go-to choice based on your reputation for meeting those needs, or simply being easily accessible and always being available when they need can be a game changer for you and your consumers alike. Like being there and answering the phone every time, no phone call missed, no message on Instagram missed. That can be a game changer, and people might just appreciate that and remember you for it. You send an audio message or a video message on Instagram to somebody, I guarantee someone's going to remember you for it because it's something they're not going to expect. In other words, instead of just being the only ones once in a blue moon, offering a great customer experience, having sexy looking packaging people want to get their hands on, like I do with the Apple product or a Rode product, Having colors your competitors aren't using, having a simple and easily recognizable logo, having a captivating voice that connects with your consumers, all of this will make for a distinctive brand that your brand will be remembered for, bought from, and thought about for those reasons. Not just because you are different or just the only one that offers it ever or in that town. Because you can still become the go-to choice for any of those reasons. It just depends on how committed you are to growing your brand, using and being a distinctive brand and using those assets rather than needing to be a differentiated brand. And that's my spiel. That's nearly an hour. That's ridiculous. Thank you for joining me here in my little, I don't know what you'd call it, but this is my view on distinctive branding and not needing to be a differentiated brand. I see it so unnecessarily trying to be attained, and it doesn't last. It's proven not to last in many aspects, apart from being geographically the only one. But even so, it can change. Now, I'm not going to keep banging on because I've kind of made the same point over and over, and I hope this might be something that you consider in how you approach branding and helping others or helping your own brand see success. And you can always turn to a brand identity designer like myself to help you create those distinctive assets, to help you find that voice, and to help you stand out and be thought of when needed. Now, thank you so much for joining here on YouTube, here on Instagram Live, here on the podcast. You can subscribe, you can follow, you can put on the notification bells to the posts, to the content, whatever it might be. I'm going to flip up that little screen here on YouTube. You can see a little, oh, there it is. Anyway, if you're on YouTube, you'd see the little graphic that pops up there. But look, that's me done for the fortnight. I mean, it's been 6 weeks. I'm not going to lie. But this is going to be back every second week with content. And I will see you in 2 more weeks about branding. All about branding. I'm your host, Frank. See you later.